Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education that sets you up for a successful career. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, September 12th, and welcome to episode number 85, What Parents Can Do Now for Kids 12 and Under. In this week's news, parents gone wild, high drama inside D.C.'s most elite private school. And we'll be in chapter 85 of 171 Answers, and we're talking about setting up opportunities for your kids who are 12 and under. And it's time again for our bonus content segment, and we're talking about 8 things that Mark wishes admissions counselors would or could tell their applicants. And Mark will be in the final part of his interview with Mr. Dave Wagner as they transition from the common application into all about St. Olaf College. And who is it good for?
Anika, I'm so excited to be recording 85 with you today.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's awesome. What'd you do for Labor Day? Anything?
Actually, no. We kind of chilled kind of hard. We had a family member come over and we ended up playing Scrabble, but...
That's okay. I got Scrabbled on the golf course by my brother. He flew in for 2 days, and I used to kick his butt all the time from Denver. He said, let's play golf, and then he spanked me. So my ego's bruised, but I had fun.
I was saying, look at me, because I'm saying, look at me learning something new about you again. I didn't know you played golf.
Oh, that's my favorite sport. I used to be addicted.
Oh, really?
I used to be so addicted. Yeah, it's all good. So listeners, we want to thank you so much. A number of you stepped up and filled out our survey since we announced it last week. Just a reminder, you no longer need to go to the show notes. You can just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com. Go to the About Us section, and then you'll see a survey link. You can just click it. And I know one thing Anika and I are extremely curious about. There's a question on there that says, is our podcast the right length, too short, too long? So we really want to get your feedback on the length of our podcast, as well as everything else. All right, Anika, you ready for admissions vernacular?
I am.
First week, we looked at overmatching. Then we looked at first years. And then this one, now it's really interesting. I've attended 3 information sessions with colleges today and 3 yesterday. And in each one time yesterday and one time today, an admission officer used this term. And the term is stacking. Sometimes it's used as stack. Oh, we don't stack, or we stack, or, stacking, we do stacking. And I don't think I've actually shared that on this podcast. I don't remember. Do you remember that term, or do you know what that term is?
This will be a first for me. Go ahead.
Okay. So stacking is the idea of like combining scholarships. So for example, when I did a profile on Elon, I talked about how everybody's automatically considered for their presidential scholarship, which is up to $6,000. But they also have lots of other scholarships that you have to apply for. So if a school stacks, it means that you can get multiple scholarships without one negating them. Where schools that don't stack, they say, okay, well, you already got this one scholarship, so you can't apply for any others from us. So it's like combining scholarships. Does that make sense? Like they stack up on top of each other?
It does. So is one more common than the other one?
Well, that's a great question. It's you know what? I don't even know the answer to that, because I would say most schools stack if I had to guess, but it's pretty close. Like it's not one of those 90-10 things, That was a really good question. And I don't even know where I would find the answer to that out. I'm just basing it off all the time schools say we stack, we don't stack. You know what I mean? I'm just anecdotally building it up in my mind. And I feel like more have said that they do stack. But then again, when they don't stack, they don't like to talk about it either.
Okay. That makes sense, right?
Yeah. And friends, the last 7 weeks we've done a college spotlight. We did one on Harvard. We did one on the University of Georgia. We did one on the University of San Francisco, Stanford, Smith, UPenn, and Elon. Trying to break it up there. I don't know if anybody noticed, but it's like a couple in the West Coast, a couple in the Midwest, a couple in the East, trying to move around geographically. We're not going to do that today because Dave Wagner is doing his whole interview on St. Olaf, another Midwest school. So we're going to take a break on that, but we will resume next week again with Case Western Reserve in Ohio. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article Lordy B. It's entitled Parents Gone Wild, High Drama Inside D.C.'s Most Elite Private School. And this is found pretty recently in the actually it's in the Atlantic. I found it in the Atlantic by Mr. Adam Harris. And so Sidwell Friends, this highly selective Quaker school in D.C., apparently has some parents who totally disregard the Quaker beliefs that God is in every person and should lead people to do good for others. Reason being is because recently some of their college counseling staff have resigned, likely due to some extreme harassment from these parents, including but not limited to anonymous postings and message boards complaining about their kids not getting into selective schools, but that is just minimal. So there was this letter to the senior parents that just came out from their head of school before school starts, or I guess just as school was starting, reminding parents of things such as recording of conversations with counselors is prohibited. They will not consider anonymous or unsubstantiated claims made about student behavior. They will not respond to calls issued from blocked telephone numbers, among other things. Okay, Mark, so Lord, all of these, I'm kind of over these parents a little bit right now, but
I'm sure you are.
I'm just saying, so all of these reports of this behavior, like not just here at Sitwell, I mean, the cheating on the SATs, giving up the guardianship of the kids, harassing the college counselors, lying on other kids. Is there any justification whatsoever or some slight chance that we can empathize with any of these parents who are clearly losing their minds?
Boy, that was a tough question the way you worded it. Because I always try to empathize with everybody. I try hard to try to see things from people's perspective, and certainly some people are afraid that their child is not going to have, a better life than them. And so that is part of what, a lot of times we do things with mixed motives. So that's part of the motivation. But overall, I'm having a hard time empathizing with some of these people, just to be completely honest, Anika. It's kind of tough. This is really, really aberrant behavior. I'm just going to read just a portion. I got my whooping on the survey by reading the whole thing, so I know I won't be going there. But I know you loved every little second of that, too. You're just chuckling over there last week.
Still loving it, yes.
I know you were.
Go right ahead. We do it.
But no one said I can't read portions. It goes as follows. Garmin is the head of school. I'm writing in follow-up to Patrick Gallagher, who is the head of college counseling, pre-break letter. So basically, you got the head of school following up on the letter that went out from the head of college counseling, which shared several newly implemented policies in the college counseling office. As you will recall, the letter stated that the college counseling office prohibits the recording of conversations with our counselors, will not consider anonymous or unsubstantiated claims made about student behavior. So basically, parents were spreading rumors on other kids they felt their kids were competing with for spots. And they were creating unsubstantiated rumors. So this is where I'm just having a real hard time with this empathy thing you're asking for. Unsubstantiated rumors made about student behavior. Will not respond to calls issued from blocked telephone numbers. Does not respond to any inquiry for student records unless that request is made by a student or an approved family member. The new policies stem from a handful of unfortunate and uninformed interactions, some of which have been very unkind to students. Others have disrespected our counselors. And then I'm not going to read the next couple of paragraphs. I'll just skip over and read a few more sentences. And then it says, instances of disrespect are anomalous and often anonymous, but have nevertheless become increasingly intense and inappropriate. The circulation of rumors about students and or the verbal assault, this is strong language, the verbal assault of employees are antithetical to the school's values, and they create a dispiriting work environment. When transgressors can be identified, they may be prohibited from meeting with the college counseling office and or subject to additional penalties as articulated in the handbook. So I got to say something, Anika. This story broke my heart. One of our regular listeners, who's also a client, sent this over to me to read, and I said, oh, gee. This looks good. What do you think, Anika? Let's put this on the docket. It breaks my heart because When I worked at Westtown School, Westtown and Sidwell are very close to each other as two of the leading Quaker schools in the country. In fact, the guy that hired me at Westtown, Tom Farquhar, who was the head of school at Westtown, left and became the head of school at Sidwell. And, I organized a big, huge national college fair every other year, and Sidwell would come and participate in that. I had D.C. as a travel territory. Every time I go to D.C., I'd meet with the people at Sidwell, and I know a lot of people there, and they're really good people. This is not what they are about. It's just the pressure of D.C. When I had D.C., there's just a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of pressure in that culture, as there is in New York, which was also my territory, for people to go to an elite school. And when you have a place like Sidwell that's had the Nixon's kids and have had the Clintons and have had the Obamas, and you have all those powerful DC people in the Beltway, they're sort of clamoring for their kid to go there. And I just know how hard Sidwell worked to try to sort of ratchet down this kind of stuff, and how they tried really hard to ferret out these type of parents in the admissions process. But it's not that easy to do, because some people they know how to not show their obnoxious side going through the admission process. And a lot of times, Sidwell's a K through 12. So a lot of times these kids are coming into schools, as 4 and 5 year olds, at the time.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen this, Anika, because you've done the sports scene with your kids, as I have. But some of the most detestable and aberrant behavior I ever have observed is watching parents in AAU basketball games, just go crazy berating refs. Is that little laugh like one of identification?
Oh God, of course. And
you
not
your
just
stories
there,
too?
baseball, soccer, everywhere.
Yep.
Football especially. Oh my gosh. You gave me a flashback. Yeah.
Yes. So I think one of the things that I wanted to do with this article is just look at what message are we sending our children when we act this way. And I wrote down a few things. I don't know if you want to comment on any, but this is some of the things I wrote down. And I think all of these are very dangerous. I think we're sending the message that this is where winners or losers are determined, where you go to college. And nothing could be so far away from the truth. That's a ridiculous message to send to a teenager. Another message, you're not going to be proud of them if they don't get into a bumper sticker school that they'll be proud about to tell in their social circle. Another message, hard work matters, but what really matters is where you go to college. Another one, being a good person matters, but what's really more important in the big scheme of life is where you go to college. Being resilient and getting back up when you're knocked down is nice, but what really matters is, do you go to Designer U? And this is not an anti-prestige rant. Prestige can be the icing on the cake. It's not the cake. Helping other people is nice, but if you don't go to Designer U, it doesn't really matter. Like, these are all subtle messages that are conveyed as parents, when we're over the top. Doing something you truly love and enjoy and are good at, yeah, that's nice, but it won't amount to a hill of beans if you don't go to impressive university over here. And the worst part of all of this is, I honestly don't believe a lot of the parents realize that they really aren't acting this way so much because they care so much about their child. They're really acting this way because they're looking at their child's acceptance to sort of validate their own parenting and to improve their own social status. Now, I can't judge everybody's heart, but that's just my experience from these behaviors that I've seen. That's what I wanted to share. Any thoughts on anything there, Anika?
Enough parents, and enough about these parents is killing me.
Yeah, we've had our fair share, haven't we? From doing a couple episodes on Rick Singer, and then to the giving your kids up for guardianship. I think we need to boycott some of these articles on
that are doing some sunny things. I don't know.
I think we need to take a break on these kind of articles for a while.
Please. Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, a lot of you, more so than I realize, have parents in middle school or even younger that are listening to the podcast. And the reason I know that is our survey does ask, are you a parent of a college student? Are you a parent of a high school student? Are you a parent of a middle school student? Are you a college admissions officer? Are you a college counselor? So we have some questions in there. And Anika, we've had more responses from middle schoolers than I thought. So God bless people who want to learn information early to apply it to their children. I respect that highly because, early bird gets the worm. And as long as, you're not complete college obsessed, but it's all about learning things so you can apply them and give yourself maximum opportunities. So in this chapter of 171 answers, that's what we look at. What are the things that you can do if you're a parent of a younger child now to position them to have more opportunities? Anika, you've read the chapter. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all about John Andrew Madden because he's big old sixth grade.
Oh, yeah. You're applying this to your 11-year-old, aren't you?
Yeah. So there were quite a few in here that it's funny because I just dove right into it. And I was like, John, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this?
You talked to your 11-year-old about it? Good for you. Good for you.
And he actually,
but you have to tell me what he said. You have to give his commentary.
Well, because you were giving recommendations, right? Do this or consider this. Like, I mean, things like household chores. I have been terrible at assigning my kids to household chores. Like, I'll tell them clean that mess up, but I haven't given them substantial things, right? But the one thing you recommended, you said you're a huge believer in summer residential experiences. And I thought about that. I was like, I never, ever, ever thought about that with any of my kids. And then I asked, I said, John, what do you think about going to a camp for like weeks at a time? He was like, yeah, I think I'll do it. I was like, what?
He surprised you.
Yeah, he did. So, I mean, it's just like things that I wouldn't normally think of.
So share some of the things that jumped off the page at you in this chapter that you thought either, that's a good idea or, whatever you want to share.
Well, let me point out two. And one of them, you kind of threw me off a little bit that I have a question about.
Okay.
So one of them, you said expose them to role models. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. Because at this age, does he really have one? Like, how do I go about identifying? Like, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, okay, now we got to figure out how to identify role models for our kids. But you said getting a job. Like, how do they get a job that young? I mean, that's my question. How do they get...
There's a lot of things you can do, even things from home. It's just about being creative. It doesn't have to now, it's a little different. I had a paper route when I was 9 years old. But
excellent points. I got you. Mowing the grass,
and
walking
I won't
dogs.
and I'll never forget because and I won't forget that paper route because this dog named Blackie bit me in the face.
Oh,
and I'm still scared of dogs to this day.
Oh my God. Okay.
But it was still a good experience overall. I have no regrets.
Right.
I learned some lessons as a 9-year-old, and then I used to sell like my mom's lemonade and hot dogs at the front, the front on the street. And then sometimes she would come home and say, "Where's all that food I bought? You sold it at the." I was an entrepreneur back then.
Good for you. Darn it. Well, then, okay, thank you. Because, I'm thinking about him going in and filling out an application. I was like, wait a minute. This is not happening. But you're right. I didn't think about the small things you don't think of. And then I've always thought about this. And I feel like, every kid, all of my 3 kids, I do something better with each one, right? And you talk about volunteering in here. And I know that that's going to be like my 3rd kid improvement. Because, I kind of, it was just out the water I just couldn't get it together with Jalen at all. Janaea, she's doing a little bit, she's doing some, so that's good, right? She started later in the game. So now it's like, okay, John, I got you now. Like now I know we got to start volunteering. So this is just, matter of fact, I got a couple things on the docket I got to follow up on in the next few days. But that, and all the way down to loving them unconditionally, like, really acknowledging the kid for who they are and just encouraging them. And I just love those kind of reminders. So, I mean, not that I wasn't doing that, but just saying.
Just another reminder didn't hurt.
Yeah.
So a couple of my favorite ones in here. I talk about this book by Dr. Hallowell, who used to be head of a department at Harvard. He's retired now. But I heard him speak because he came and did a professional development for our faculty at Westtown. And he wrote a book called The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness. And the book is fascinating because basically the book argues, he says, look, I'm at Harvard and I'm with a bunch of kids who feel like they're losers because they're not at the top of their class, because they bought into what he calls the pyramid model, where there's like one winner at the top. And so what he advocates for is reverse the pyramid model. There can be tons and tons of winners. But what you need to do is if you redefine success, and you redefine success by doing what you love, and making a difference in the lives of others by doing what you love. And what he argues is, and the reason why the name of the book is called The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness, and we'll put a link in the show notes. See, I'm getting better. Is that if you watch and observe how a child plays, even at an early age, they're giving you insights into how they're wired, right?
Mm.
And so, like at a really early age, somebody may be really active and they're always got a ball or bat in their hand, and then somebody else wants to do puzzles all the time, and someone else is really into watching animals, and you really can get insights into what a child loves at a really early age. And then you can start to expose them more and more and more to things consistent with what they're showing you that they love. And then what he argues in the book is that most things that you love can be turned into a career. Most of the things that you love can be turned into a career. And so that to me is one of the things that's important, actually, is to begin to identify as early as possible, what is it my child is good at and what is it that they love, so that you can target some of your enrichment in areas that their natural proclivities are tailored toward, rather than just sort of the scattershot approach where try piano and then you try guitar and then you say, music's not your thing. Let's try dance lesson. You just kind of jump all around. Not that there's not a place for some of that, but it's more of an informed approach where you're basing it on your, what your child, if they're all into science and technology and robotics, and then those are the camps and the enrichment that you target toward. And you can begin to do those things early. Does that make sense, Anika, or not?
Yeah, and that was actually one of the other ones I noted too, was just that, tailoring to their interest. And that is extremely helpful too, because I remember back in the heyday, I was like all over the place, like, oh, let's go over here and then let's go across the world and let's go do it, So I didn't know that at one point in time. So that's great. No, I think that's helpful.
I mean, we can't cover all of these. I talk a lot about exposure to different cultures and travel. My aunt used to say travel is the most powerful educator. And just exposing your horizon to different cultures. And if you don't have the money to do it internationally, exposing to different cultures domestically. Another thing, and I think this is really important, is, and you were like the poster child for this, Anika. Our listeners don't know this, but you were like president of the PTSA Association and very, very involved. And we first met. That had nothing to do with me. When I first met you, you were doing leadership stuff like that.
Right.
And so getting actively involved in your child's school, meeting regularly with your child's teachers, constantly getting feedback from your child's teachers about their strengths and areas for growth. That is so important. And then listen to what they have to say. Don't be defensive. That is a really, really important way, one, to identify gifts, but also to identify areas for improvement. Maybe,
it's so funny you say that, Mark, because I was just, when I reach out to the teachers, I'm like, hey, how was class today? How's he doing? I don't think I've ever say, hey, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? It eventually comes out, but that hasn't been a targeted conversation. So darn, thank you.
No, that's extremely important, because you'll start to see if it's really a gift, then it should start, start to see consistency amongst teachers. We'll start to say similar things. And then if it's an area for improvement, it could be anything. It could be getting along with peers. It could be just bad habits that you have, right? Or it could be academic things like reading is not up to grade level or struggling with math. And maybe you need to get some learning assessment done. Like that is really, really, really important to keep them on the right path. So anyway, I'm not going to list all of these because it would take a long time, but those are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight today.
Okay. Love it.
Anything else? You want to keep it moving?
I absolutely love the article. Thank you so much. But yes, we can keep it moving.
Sounds good. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
All right, Mark, we've got some bonus content from you, sir, this week. And the topic, it looks like it's 8 things that Mark wishes admissions counselors could or would tell applicants. Goodness gracious, Mark. What could they be?
Well, and I intentionally said could or would because some of these things are things that they just can't tell you, you know? And so it's not an issue of like, what's wrong with them? You know, like sometimes they can't say certain things. They just can't. And so it's not about being critical. It's just things that I wish they could say. And it's really on my mind because this is travel season for admission officers. And as I mentioned before in the podcast, in my day job, of course, I do college counseling as well. And we get 160 colleges that visit, you know, the KIPP school that I work at. So this is the time of the year where I'm sitting in, like, you're not going to catch me before noon, Anika, because I'm sitting in college presentations all the way up until 11:30 pretty much every day, you know, not Friday, but Monday through Thursday. And so I'm sitting in presentation after presentation and students are in there. Now, sometimes nobody shows up and that's okay. I actually like those because I can just talk one-on-one with just the counselor. Those are great too. But I've just been thinking a lot about this. Like, where is the miscommunication happening? What are the things that the admission officer says or doesn't say, and I can completely see they are not correctly interpreted? And this is not a student thing because, I'm sitting in these sessions a lot because I'll visit about 40 colleges a year. So I'm doing this with adults and students. So this is not so much a student thing. It's just right now I'm sitting in 12 to 15 a week with students.
Wow.
But then it's the same thing for adults. And so I've been thinking about this, and Anika, we ran an article in the news section that was kind of something like this a while ago, but this is just my version. That was the author's version of that article. Okay. So my version's a little different. So the first one, and I've commented on this once before, but I'll go a little deeper. I wish they would do a better job explaining how holistic admissions works. I've been pretty outspoken about this recently. Like, I have said this personally. I've had conversations with 7 different elite schools about this in the last 30 days because it's kind of a little bit of my hobby horse. And so what I mean by this is the way colleges explain holistic admissions, they say, we're not just looking at things like your test scores and your grade point average. We're looking at you as a whole person. And sometimes they say, this is actually a quote, so you'll hear some of them say, what it means is that there are no low side cutoffs. And do you know what that means, Anika? No low side cutoffs?
Like if I'm a weak tester, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm out of there.
Yeah,
maybe?
But to be even more technical, what it means is there's no official number that if you hit this on your SAT, ACT, then you're out of there.
Okay.
Right? Now, this is a toxic brew because all of us as human beings, we all have a tendency to see what we want to see. So when you have a student sitting out there or a parent out there hoping for the best, looking for the silver lining to hope to see things the way they want to see them, and then you have admissions officers explaining it that way, what it does is it gives students false hope. So they think, oh, wow, like I've got pathetic test scores or a really low GPA. It actually happened in one of my sessions today. Students said, well, what if my grade point average is lower than these numbers here? What about me? And so it gives them false hope because the student thinks, you know what? That's great because I can just write my way in with my essay writing, or I'll just talk my way in with my interview skills, or I've got this person who will write this unbelievable recommendation about me. Or I remember one parent saying to me, you know what? It doesn't really matter what my kids' grades or test scores are. As long as I kiss the admissions officer's butt enough, they're going to let my kid in. Well, that was wrong as they got denied. But anyway, let's not go there. So it gives people false hope. And in reality, the way holistic admissions works at a highly selective school is that it is extremely unusual if your academic profile is way outside of their normal academic profile, that you will even get a chance for your recommendations to be considered. You'll even get a chance for your essays to be considered. You'll even get a chance for your interview, if they have one, to be considered. You'll even get a chance for your extracurriculars to be considered. Because first and foremost, these are academic institutions. And first and foremost, they want to please their faculty. And if you're outside of their profile, significantly outside of their profile, you have to have a very powerful hook. And what college admissions officers do is they speak like they're speaking to the exception. So yeah, it's a different standard if I'm speaking to a group and the best football player in the country is out there, right? It's different, or if like a senator's kid is in the audience. It's different standard for them, but they speak to the exception and not to the norm, and therefore they give people false hope. And so what I'm challenging schools to do, and when you say you do holistic admissions, that's great because it's true. You do holistic admissions. And there are some times when you go way outside your profile. It's not like it is a lie, but it's so rare unless somebody else has something else that is such a powerful institutional priority to trump all that. So what I'm telling them to do is I want you to put your test scores up by bandwidths of 100 so people can see how many kids do you take with scores. For example, I was talking to a student who was interested in MIT. Okay. Actually, this has happened to me twice now in the last month. Okay. And in both cases, students had a math test score under 600. They said, but MIT says they do holistic admissions. I pull up the data and show MIT took absolutely 0 people last year, Anika, with a math SAT under 700. And so that's what I want people to understand, that if you're outside of their academic profile, then you don't give yourself a chance for those holistic factors to be considered. Any comments on that?
No, that's pretty clear.
Okay, so number 2 is very similar, but just slightly different. So the first was about how they explain holistic admissions, right? Second is, I wish they would not make a non-competitive applicant feel like they should apply if they're really dead on arrival. So the way this goes is, you're a highly competitive school, right? School that rarely takes students with maybe more than like a B+ on their transcript. And then someone will say, well, I'm looking at these grades and these scores on your profile. Like, they're really, really high. Like, what about me? Like, I've got a few C's. Like, is there like no hope for me? Like, a student will say something like that. So how do you think most admissions officers answer that question, Anika?
Oh, maybe. Just give it a try.
Yeah, they say, well, these are our 25th to 75th percentile range. But we still take a quarter of kids under here. That they'll say something to encourage the person. Now, why do you think they do that?
Well, we talked about gaming numbers, getting their rankings up and all that crap. But wait, so are you saying that in some cases they may flat out lie that they don't take kids under a certain percentage? Like, oh, there's a small percentage of kids that don't fall into that range.
So what I would like to see them do is to properly expectation set for the kid. And I'm going to be honest, it's going to be really unlikely that we would take a student with a few C's. It hasn't happened before, yes. Is it very unlikely? Yes, to properly expectation set. But they don't do that. Majority of them don't. Like, I can think of some that do. I'm going to give a shout out to Kane Willis at Haverford College. He is so good at being honest like this. Not that he's the only one, but I've just seen him many times do it, and I just love his transparency. So there's 2 reasons why they don't do it. One is their goal, their job a lot of times, they're held accountable to drum up more applications from your territory. That's your job. Like, your territory, whatever, let's just say it's the state of Georgia and we had 100 applications from there. Okay, well, let's pick up our school visits. Let's do some more receptions. Let's do some more events. Let's see if we can get 120 applications out of Georgia. So I just made up a number, right? It could have been 500 to, you know what I mean? I just made a number up. It's not like 100 is a magic number. So that's part of your job as a recruiter, is to get more applications out of the territory. Because, I mean, this figures in this stuff we'll talk about in a second, but that's part of your job. And so if you keep trying to dissuade non-competitive applicants from applying, you're quote unquote not going to make your quota. Now, a lot of times it's not a strict quota like in sales. Depends on how each office is run. But still, the office, they don't want you coming back and saying, okay, there were 100 applications last year. Why is there only 73 this year? Like, what happened? Were you doing your job out there? Are you like not connecting with students when you visit schools? Like, you're not going to look good. So there's a pressure to get more applications. That's part of it. The other thing, and I've really been thinking long and hard about this. A lot of times, admissions officers, and not just admissions officers, it's human nature. People want people to like them. And this is particularly true if you're at a really competitive school. Like if you're a really competitive school and you speak to a group and you tell the truth as to how strong you're, like, I'll give you an example. This is going back to like a long time ago, Anika. This is like probably like 2003-ish. So there was a student that never got in Yale, and myself and Susan, director of college counseling, we were not happy because she was really, really, truly extraordinary student. And so, we kind of pushed back in the counselor call. You have counselor calls. And like, why is this student being waitlisted? Like, because he was really extraordinary. And then said, well, academics, everything was like amazing for this student and also an athlete too. And at one point we said, there's 5 subject test scores in the 700s. And then the Yale rep said, yeah, but they're not high 700s. Not like 780, 790, 800. They're like low and mid 700s. So the reason I'm saying this is because that's something that nobody would ever say, ever, ever, ever to a group of students, because they would all be so dejected and so discouraged. And then they wouldn't like the rep. By the way, good story that they ended up taking that student off the wait list. I visited her at Yale and she was like a total rock star there. Like when I visited Yale, they were raving about her. So that story ended well. Does that make any sense, Anika? What do you think on that? Mm-hmm. Why so many times that non-competitive applicants are made to feel like they have a shot when they really don't?
No, I get it.
Okay. Then third one, I'm going to go deep into this one. We've talked about it before, but not to the level that I want to talk about it today. So, what is the answer for all these students are applying to all these schools, like adding more and more and more schools because it's easy to do it through the Common App, or it's easy, or I better protect myself because I heard it's hard to get in. So let me add 4 or 5 more schools. And the answer, and this is happening so much more than I have shared in this podcast, although we've talked about it a few times, but I'll go deep into it today, is predictive modeling and engagement scoring. Predictive modeling and engagement scoring. You think you know what I'm talking about with that, Anika, or not?
Not a clue.
Okay, well, you will when I tell you because we've talked about it. This is studying people's electronic footprint.
Oh, yeah.
Studying the electronic footprint, studying the websites that you go, where you go on the website, how often you're on the website, when did you start going on the website? Do you open emails? Do you open videos? How long do you do? All of that stuff. But it's more than just that. It's creating models to predict probability of admission. And it's being done a lot more than the public knows and a lot more than I've even let on in this podcast. And it's all happening because, do you remember me talking about a techno solutions company called Slate? Remember me mentioning Slate on the podcast at all?
Vaguely, yeah.
Okay, so Slate is this new company. Well, no, it's not new. It's 16 years old, but it is taking college admissions by storm. Okay, it's like the new Amazon. It is dominating. And there's a fascinating history in terms of behind the company and some of the things that they do. They were started by a guy named Alexander Clark. Okay, and he's a child prodigy. I mean, a complete child prodigy. He's from Jackson, Mississippi. And Anika, he basically will say he started the company in middle school. Is that crazy? In middle school, he started coding and he created a software to track grades and absences at his school. And he was paid for it as a middle schooler because he developed the software. Is that ridiculous?
Yes, it is.
And actually, I heard him interviewed. He said, well, I really kind of started in the 5th grade, but it wasn't formal till the 7th. Yeah, I'm serious. So then, he went on to create this multiple choice questionnaire for all of his fellow students. and they had to put their data into the computer, and it calculated like their 5 best matches. And this was like more of a dating, like a compatibility matchmaking software thing he did. And he printed them out on a dot matrix printer, and he sold them for 50 cents. Like, this is as a young kid. All right. And then, of course, being the brainiac he is, he goes off to Yale. And then in 2000, he builds this interactive portal for students at Yale called Yale Station. Because he looked at Yale, he said, look, you got a lot of people coming back for your like accepted student visit program, but what about people who can't make it? So he created this whole interactive portal for people that couldn't make it, and he sold it to Yale. And Yale's paying him as an 18-year-old to do all this stuff. And then he went on and he developed like the first program to release admission decisions through an online portal at Yale. And so he's getting paid to all this. So he started this. So the company's right in New Haven, Connecticut, still to this day. And this thing is, when I say blowing up, Anika, this thing is blowing up. Like, they're adding a couple hundred colleges every year. It is dominating the national landscape right now. And the stuff that this thing can do is so ridiculous how powerful it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I've kind of come around a bit, though. Remember when you and I talked and I said, I don't know about this invasion of privacy stuff. And you're like, Mark, everybody's doing it. Like, this is the world that we're in. Like, what's the biggie? Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm, I do.
I kind of understand it now. I'm more where you are, because I'm, to be honest, I know myself. If I was back on the admission side, I would be eating this stuff up, because the power of this data to predict just makes your job easier. So let me tell you a little bit more. So what is Slate? Slate's technically is a customer relations management system, also known as a CRM. Well, people say, what's the big deal? There's other CRMs. There's Salesforce. There's TargetX. And there are others out there, but nothing is doing what this thing is doing. Think of like a big virtual filing cabinet full of a big built-in brain that helps you know what student behavior is going to be. And so they've done new things. Like, for example, this year they introduced chat bots using artificial intelligence to answer frequently asked questions so that admission officers don't have to keep emailing all the time. There are so many different things that they're doing. And what happens is with Slate, if an admissions officer just goes in and flips on what's called student records in Slate, and you're going to see a series of colored dots. And each one of these dots represents some type of engagement with the college. Student attending the fair of the day, clicked on this email at 1:13. 5 days later, it's all right there. And many colleges are folding these measures of demonstrated interest into statistical models to predict who will enroll. And then Slate is doing this new thing, well, pretty new. I consider it to be pretty new, that they didn't do before. It's a little bit controversial. It's called pings, okay? And pings they're like profiles of behavior. So they'll produce a report that said people that went on this portion of the website and stayed on this portion for this amount of time, they have like a 81% chance of accepting your offer if you admit them. And this is not something that's just being done by a few colleges. This is becoming really, really, really widespread. It's really being done far more often than people realize. So it's not just, so anyway, what is it that schools are not, that I wish they could share? I wish they could say how much demonstrated interest matters, because so many schools say we don't look at demonstrated interest, and they do. They're just defining it differently. Mm-hmm. And how much sophisticated predictive models are being built. It's called predictive modeling and engagement scoring, to factor in who's going to come. And they're making admissions decisions not based off of the suitability and the strength of the applicant, but based on how high of a score you have and whether you'll come. Any thoughts?
No. I mean, so are you saying that they're doing this kind of secretly, or?
Yeah, they don't want to tell applicants this type of stuff. Like, for one, they feel like if they tell applicants this, then people will game the system. Then they'll just go in and open all of their emails just so that they'll score high on these charts, and then they won't be able to use them as effective metrics. So, you ready, me? Follow me? So they don't want to tell that. And also, it's just going to feel like they're snooping around and following every single thing you do, and people are going to be uncomfortable with that. But I wish they could tell people this, because, like, for me, it makes it harder for me to figure out right now, if I'm working with a student, what is really a probable and what is really a safety. I saw some kids turned down last year from schools they would never have been turned down before, but I know that those schools were using these sophisticated metrics and figured out this kid has a low probability of coming. And so they just dinged them and said, we're not admitting you.
Okay.
Now, did anything I say there seem new or from what I've explained before? Do you feel like, Mark, we kind of talked about all this before?
I feel like we have, honestly. I mean, but not in the context of this is what we're doing, like transparently. You know what I mean? I mean, we know that, like we talked about the digital footprint and all that stuff. But
I think
yeah,
the difference is far more schools are doing that than people realize. Far more are doing it than people realize. And it's so much to the point now, Anika, that I'm changing some of my advice. I actually will encourage my students. If you like a college, you need to open their emails they send you. And then you need to open their videos they send you and their links. And you do need, I don't want you just doing it just to game the system. You should do it because you want to really research the school. But just understand, they can go right in there. I was talking to an admission officer, and I've been talking to a lot of senior level admission officers about this. And they're saying, Mark, it's amazing. It's absolutely phenomenal. I love it. And don't get me wrong, Slate does all kinds of other things. It helps them with the event planning. It even helps them. They even have this thing in Slate right now, Anika, that is like a robot writes like a thank you follow-up letter on a card, and it looks just like regular handwriting. So you'll get in and think, oh, I got this handwritten card. So there's a lot of other things Slate does besides this. I'm just focusing just on this piece. And so for me personally now, I'm actually going to tell my students that you're going to have to be more engaged electronically because, I was talking to an admission officer and she was like, it's so funny. As soon as people apply early decision and they don't get in, all of a sudden we can just go into Slate into student records and we can see all this activity. Immediately they start thinking, let's look at this school. There's been no activity before and they don't get into school. And now it's all of a sudden they start looking there. Schools are dinging kids for stuff like that.
All right.
Okay. I don't know. I thought this was new, but maybe not. No? Nothing new there to you?
Nah, I mean, it's a good reminder.
Well, I don't remember, but you said you have not heard of predictive modeling and engagement scoring when I asked you about it.
I mean, that again, there goes the terms, these interchangeable terms on all this stuff that we've talked about before. Can y'all come up with a singular vocabulary? But
well, I think I've presented it before as something that less selective colleges did. This is something that selective colleges are also doing. So maybe that's a little different. Okay, let's move on. Okay. All right, number 4. How meeting full demonstrated need isn't meeting most people's financial needs. So this is something that 70 schools say we meet full demonstrated need. But meeting full demonstrated need is not meeting most people's financial need because, and I'm not going to get too much into this now because we're going to talk about this again in about 4 months when we get into, I have a whole chapter on this in my book. I think it's like 102 or 101. I said, why is my EFC so high? And so I'm going to get into it more there. But schools say we meet full demonstrated need. So you don't have to worry. You can just apply early decision or we're super generous with our aid packages. Sure, a school that meets full demonstrated need is a lot more generous than a school that gaps and doesn't meet full demonstrated need. However, let me just mention 2 things here. College's formula for calculating what you can pay does not look at your expenses at all. It doesn't look at your mortgage. It doesn't look at your car payment. It doesn't look at your student loans. It doesn't look at your credit card bills. It doesn't look at your parent loans. Okay? So you may have all these bills and it's sort of like, well, that was a lifestyle decision for you. It is strictly based off income and assets and family size and number of kids in college. And so it's not looking at any of that. So a school can come back and say, you know what? You don't qualify for anything. You need to pay $70,000. And you're like, what? Excuse me? I don't know if I can pay more than 25. That happens all the time. So I wish that they could. And I have very, very detailed conversations with schools. I have to give 2 more examples. I'm sorry. FAFSA schools, ones that take the FAFSA, they don't look at the cost of living at all. I'm sorry. Living in Atlanta is not the same as living in Manhattan or Palo Alto or Boston. Way more expensive. That's not even factored in at all for schools that only take the FAFSA. And for schools that take the profile, is factored in, but it's only the maximum adjustment that they make. They can make an adjustment called for what they call higher cost areas, but the maximum adjustment is 20%. I'm sorry, but places like Manhattan and all those places I mentioned, lots of places in California, they cost way more than 20% compared to other places in the country. So what it often means is when a school says we meet full demonstrated need, or sometimes they'll say full calculated need, that does not mean at all. That does not mean that they're going to meet your family's financial need. And I could say so much more about that, but I'll leave it for when we get into that chapter.
Okay.
Number 5, how money factors into admissions decisions. Money factors a lot in. First of all, you've got schools that are not need blind, which means they look at the ability to pay in terms of who they actually admit. The school is not need blind. They're looking at your ability to pay as a factor in who even gets admitted. Then you have other schools that actually give admissions offers to students that are not as strong academically, but because the family can pay a lot. And so there's all kinds of consultants out there that teach schools, here's how to get more money so that you can pay your bills and you can be financially solvent. Go after kids that are not that strong academically, but their families can pay a lot, and just throw a little small merit scholarship at them. They'll feel great. They'll feel the honor. Oh, I got this scholarship. Dress it up in a bow, spend $10 on the marketing, the packaging, and do all the fancy stuff, that you do to make the kid feel special. And you're actually admitting weaker kids than you're turning down because of the ability to pay. Not everybody does that, but that's pretty prevalent. And then you've got where schools recruit as well. So money factors into admissions decisions at more schools than people realize.
Okay.
And I could say more about that, but another way it factors in is just where you travel, like schools intentionally traveling to the affluent areas. Okay. Another thing, and this is kind of similar to that, but slightly different. When schools say that they're need blind, there's certain schools that say, oh, we're need blind in college admissions. We're need blind. We don't look at the ability to pay at all. And I used to say, I used to have this disagreement with my friend Peter Van Buskirk, who's coming on the show. He used to be, Mark, nobody's need blind. And I'd be like, yeah, they kind of are. And we used to disagree. We used to be pretty heated. Because schools that say they're need blind, they're really not looking at how much a family can pay when they make a decision, right? And I would say that's different. It's the difference between a school that doesn't look at how much you can pay when they make a decision versus a school that does look at it. That's true. That's a legitimate point. But here's where he's right. Even schools that say they're need blind, they're not need blind usually for transfer students. They're not need blind normally for international students. And his point, if you're not need blind for everybody, how can you say you're need blind if you're only need blind for some? And also, once again, you're recruiting intentionally in affluent neighborhoods because you'll get enough money out of those applicants. So you're really, truly not need blind. And as he says, you have to submit a line item when you submit your nonprofit status that shows your financial aid. That's a huge line item. No school can actually not know what that variable is going to be. Okay, Anika, number 7, we've talked about this before in other podcasts, but I'll briefly touch on it. Ways in which colleges try so hard to increase their prestige. And the 3 big ones are rankings. There must be over 1,000 different organizations out there that rank things for college, Anika, because everybody, like just today in my sessions, we're number 1 in this, according to this. One of these times I want to just keep a record of every organization I've never even heard of. Like Aunt Martha's book club ranked us number 1.
Well,
Gee, it's crazy. So everybody is trying to increase their prestige either by claiming they're ranked this and that by some ranking or by recruiting to reject, which that's another thing. They can never tell schools we recruit to reject, meaning we're trying to drive our acceptance rate down by drumming up or
tell parents or families that they wouldn't tell families that
can't tell that. That's how you increase your prestige, just saying, oh my goodness, they only accept 19% this year. I'm impressed. That's how they improve their brand. And then the third thing is test scores, driving up test scores. Everything from giving merit aid to kids with high test scores, using priority apps to so trying to get their test scores higher, trying to improve their rankings, trying to drive down their acceptance rate so that people will think it's such an honor to get in. And then here's the thing is, I don't blame them for doing it because this stuff does work. It works. Right. Like if people feel like, oh my goodness, what an honor I got in, you have a much better chance of getting somebody to enroll and getting somebody to be willing to pay a lot of money for your school. So they're not inaccurate to do it, but it's just a lot of gamesmanship behind the scenes to increase your prestige by increasing your rankings, decreasing your acceptance rates, and increasing your test scores.
Right.
And he thought, do you feel we've talked about that before? Yes, no?
Well, yeah, we've definitely talked about it before, but I mean, but how would you want that to be conveyed to a family? Like can...
That's a great question.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, okay. So on the rankings one, like, okay, we're ranked this, but do you know there's over 1,000 people out there that rank, and everybody literally is ranked at the top in something, And some of these things have no
Right.
scientific background at all, I wish that people knew rather than, oh, wow, I'm impressed. Okay. In terms of driving down acceptance rate, I wish they knew how colleges recruit to reject sometimes. That's part of the game. That's the game in admissions, is to recruit to reject. It doesn't mean you don't go places where you're hoping to get good applicants, but I'll give you an example. I was talking with a college, and they work with the Questbridge program, which I love the program. It's amazing. 16,000 applications a year. This school, 13% of all their applications come from Questbridge, one organization. Now, those are gifted and talented low-income kids, of which they're going to maybe take about 8. This was a liberal arts school, maybe 8 to 10. So, yeah, they're recruiting from Questbridge because Questbridge has amazing kids. One of the reasons also is that they can get literally 13% of their applications, totally driving down their acceptance rate, knowing they're only going to give those kids require full scholarships. They're not going to give out that many to them. So, did I answer your question? What I wish people could know, that recruiting to reject happens.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but I don't see that as a communication
No, that's why I
possibility
said they
with a
can't do this.
Mhm.
Like, they can't say these things. Some of the things they can't
Right.
say, like, because their job description is not to do that. It's to enhance their brand. It's not always just to meet your needs. And when you're trying
I
to,
gotcha.
like, admissions is sales. You're trying to convince somebody of something. You can't talk about how this helps me. You have to talk about how it helps you.
Right.
And then the last thing I said is, and we've talked about this before, but just how U.S. News and World Reports is just literally driving everything behind college admissions. Like, and these are not educators. It'd be like me walking into like a Mercedes dealer and trying to tell mechanics like how to fix a car. Like, these are not people that understand really what makes quality education, but it's driving things. And schools are making massive changes just to climb the rankings. And when I mean changes, I mean they're doing things that are not in their best educational interest to improve their rankings. It's not like they're just doing things to improve their educational quality. For example, let's say you have a school and they know that it would be good if they had more diversity, socioeconomic, racial, everything. But if they feel like, well, in order to, improve their rankings, we have to bring in kids with higher test scores, kids who are most likely to graduate. So let's go for the safest bet. So let's go for affluent kids who come from highly educated parents, because they're more likely to graduate because their parents graduated. Our test scores are more likely to be higher. That's who we go after, even if most of our population is already like that. It's not the best educational environment, but it'll improve our rankings. So U.S. News is like driving things in ways that work against educational quality. And the last thing I want to say on this, Anika, is, now I don't normally like to say something like this because I never heard this with my own ears, but it was told to me by such a credible source that I'm going to say it, because I just know this guy would not tell me something that's not true. So Christoph Gutentag, he is the dean of admission at Duke. He's been there for 27 years. Apparently, a couple different times he said at some national conferences when counselors have pushed back and said, like, why are you doing this? Like, do you realize what it's doing to our kids? You know what he said? He said, you may not want to hear this, but it's not about you. It's about us. And I think that people need to understand that that is true. And I'm not trying to criticize, because I felt I was very, very, very student friendly when I did admissions. I really cared, but I'm going to give you an example of something that I did. So when I was out recruiting boarding school, sometimes people would say, you know what? You don't have as many Ivy League schools on your list as places like Choate, Exeter, and Andover. And so first I would say, well, first of all, Andover and Exeter are almost 3 times our size. Okay. So they should have more because they have triple the size. I said, and if they take the top 2% of kids and we take the top 20%, then yeah, they're going to have more Ivy League schools on there, but that doesn't mean it's easier for you to get into an Ivy League school. So first I tried that, and that really didn't work that well. It was not that satisfying of an answer. So then I said, I got a better idea. Let me take the numbers off, because we used to like list all the schools and how many kids went to each school. And what we'll do instead is let's put in bold anytime someone has been, like, if we've sent multiple kids to a school, we'll put it in bold. And if not, we won't put it in bold. And of course, like, we had bold for like all of those Ivy League schools, right? And so that's how we produced the list. That was my idea. So if you ask a parent, they would have much rather have seen me have like 8 kids went here, 13 went here, versus just bold or non-bold, right?
Hmm.
But why did I do that? I did that because I'm trying to recruit the absolute best kids that I can. And if this is an obstacle for me getting the kids I want, then I'm going to repackage it in a way that helps me to recruit the kids I'm trying to get. So I'm not critical of schools. My job and my mission was to bring in the most talented and gifted kids that I can. That doesn't always work in concert with doing what's in the best interest of students.
Oh, wow.
And I was very student friendly. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to do what's best for my institution. So I'm not being critical.
Yikes.
What do you think about what I just said?
I think that's
Messed up?
messed up. Yeah. You nailed it. Yes.
Did you think, Mark, I can't believe you did that?
I mean, it's the belly of the beast. I get it now, but still, it's just like, darn, where is the focus here? Clearly,
I'm trying, and that's why I'm trying to be transparent.
Right.
But I'm trying to let people know, like, yeah, you're a nonprofit and you have a mission. But if you feel like certain things are hindering your ability to accomplish your mission, then you're going to do those things that help you to accomplish my mission. My mission, first and foremost, is to bring the most gifted and talented kids into my school that can help my school. Most of the time that coincides with helping kids, but sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I'm first and foremost going to do what's best for my institution. And that's my job. And that's how people operate.
Whew. Better find
You didn't like it, did you?
No.
You know, it's funny. I started to explain this to one of our teachers at once, and she's like, I can't take this anymore. I don't want to know how the sausage is made. Stop telling me this stuff. It's like spoiling my view. Don't tell me how the sausage is made anymore.
I feel like her, Mark. Stop with the sausage.
Okay. Well, I tried. That's what the point of all this was. I'm trying to let people know how the sausage is made.
Oh, give us some grits and eggs or something.
About waffles and pancakes.
Something light and fluffy, please.
All right, let's end this segment. I know I went really in depth, everybody. I don't know if this was interesting or this was boring, but I wanted to do a deep dive into 8 things that I think that I wish admission officers would and could tell families. And hopefully I didn't put you to sleep like I think I did to Anika.
I'm not asleep, Mark. I'm
okay.
very intrigued, by the way.
There you go. Okay. Oh. Okay, friends, for this week, it's all about who is St. Olaf. And Dave explains what makes St. Olaf different and special. He includes a conversation about what he regards as the strongest programs at St. Olaf. He also talks about the changes he's seen in his 19 years, both in admissions and as a student there. And he also lets us know the type of student who will do well at Olaf. And he also talks about the areas that the college can continue to grow and improve. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
So let's talk about St. Olaf. We've been talking about the Common App. Give us the elevator speech. Like, give us an overview. Who is St. Olaf? And, let our listeners know.
Yeah, well, for those of you who have not been to Minnesota, we are a quick 45-minute drive south of Minneapolis and St. Paul, commonly known as the Twin Cities, which is a really, really great metropolitan area. And we are in Northfield, Minnesota, which is known as the home of cows, colleges, and contentment. It's a good tagline. And we feel really lucky. We're in the same community as Carleton College. So there are 2 nationally and internationally known liberal arts colleges that are literally, I think, like 1.5 to 2 miles from one another. So Northfield itself is a really wonderful community. St. Olaf is a student body of about 3,000 students. About 40% of our students are from Minnesota. And we have a lot of students from Chicago area, West Coast, Colorado, and the East Coast. About 10% of this year's incoming class are international students, and we have international students coming from over 90 different countries. And about 22, it could potentially be 23 by the time September rolls around, percent of the class are domestic students of color. So the whole idea is to bring together a diverse group of students from all over the U.S. and all over the world to come and live in community here. Our goal is pretty straightforward. We are known for being a really rigorous liberal arts college. We continue to be a leading producer for sending students on to earn PhDs in science and math-related fields, which I think is very exciting. We were founded by Lutheran Norwegian immigrants. And so the college continues to be a place that values religion in a very broad sense. And we welcome religious diversity and have students from all kinds of different religious backgrounds here on campus, including students who do not identify as coming from a religious background. But I think it really adds value to a student's experience. I think it helps students think about, not only what do I want to do in this world, but who do I want to be? And what are the ways in which I find value or meaning in life? So I think that's something that's really neat. We have a huge international focus here at St. Olaf. So not only do we think it's important to bring a diverse group of international students to campus, we also think students should be out in the world. So that's one of my favorite pieces of St. Olaf, is that in any given year, we send the highest number of students to study abroad of any liberal arts college in the U.S., which is so neat. So students can do short-term 1-month programs, semester-long programs, or year-long programs, literally all over the world. And then this is a really active place. So I always say I think this is a great place for students who want a really great education, but it's also a really great place for students who want to be involved in the community. We are really well known for our music program. So about 1/3 of the entire student body is involved in music. So we have 8 choirs, 2 bands, 2 orchestras, and 3 jazz bands. Nearly 1/3 of students are also involved in varsity athletic programs. So we currently have 27 varsity athletic programs and beautiful recreation facilities here on campus. And then I think it's really important for students to be out in the community, and about 3/4 of students at St. Olaf volunteer on a regular basis. So I think obviously there are so many great institutions out in our country, but I feel really lucky to work at a place that I think is known for being a really, really wonderful school, but also a school that really attracts really kind, humble, and thoughtful young people. And this is a place where kindness is valued. It's a place where people enjoy working collaboratively with one another, and it doesn't have the sort of cutthroat or really hyper-competitive vibe of some schools. So I think it's a really remarkable place, and I feel so lucky to have worked here for almost 15 years.
Yeah, and you know what? Everything you said, I felt. I mean, the campus is breathtaking. Your programs are very strong academically. There's no question about that. And as you said, you show up in highest percentage of kids getting PhDs in a number of different disciplines.
Right.
But it didn't have that. Not only did it not have that cutthroat vibe, it didn't have that over-the-top intensity vibe.
Yeah.
Where it felt like people still take time to get to know you, are friendly.
Yep.
And there was a relaxed component that it felt very emotionally healthy.
Yeah. That's a great
and yeah, it really did. And, you're right. You're right by Carleton. You guys actually St. Olaf students can eat at Carleton for lunch, or they can eat at your place for dinner. You're literally that close. You share dining hall arrangement with them. So, I think that if someone wants selective liberal arts, it really makes sense to visit your area, because they can take in quite a few schools at one time and really make their trip worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel really fortunate. Minnesota has a lot of wonderful liberal arts colleges. So I think a visit to Minnesota can be very worthwhile. And all of the schools have, I think, very different personalities. And so it's great for students to be able to be on campus and sort of experience that themselves.
So I know you mentioned music, which you're renowned for as a strong program, and study abroad is also something. Anything else that you think is just particularly strong that you'd like to point out? And I know you're strong across the board.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really well-rounded school in general, but I think a lot of students find us through their passion for either science and math, or music, or studying abroad is a huge component and part of who we are. So those are kind of the really big things I think that we are known for.
And I think theater too, right? Because I went into my visit knowing that you were exceptionally strong in music, but in talking with some tour guides and some people, I came away feeling like other aspects of the arts were also really celebrated.
Yeah, all 4 of the fine arts programs, theater, art, music, and dance, are all independently accredited, and they're all incredibly strong. So I think for students who want a really, really strong fine arts experience in a liberal arts setting, St. Olaf is incredible. I was watching the Tony Awards like a week and a half ago, and 2 of my classmates, both Erics, were on stage for being part of Tony Award winning productions. Oklahoma, and Hadestown, which I thought was just so remarkable. So it's really, really exciting, I think, to see what graduates from St. Olaf go on to do after they finish their time here.
So that's awesome. So you've been there 15 years. And
Yeah.
that doesn't even count your time as a student, right? You've been there 15 years in admissions?
No, that's true. So 15 years plus 4 years as a student. That's a lot of my life at this place.
Yeah. So you're coming up for 20 years. So I'm sure you've seen some changes. So what changes have you seen? And let's just call it around the 19 up to 20, your 20-year stint. We count the year that you were visiting and applying. That's a 20th year there.
Woo! Years go by very, very quickly. I'm approaching a milestone birthday this next year. And so I've been thinking a lot about how quickly time passes. But I'm really proud of some of the changes that have taken place at St. Olaf. I think over my tenure, both professionally and also as a student here, I think the college has really moved from being an excellent school that was known sort of more regionally to a school that is really known nationally and internationally. And that is something that has taken, I think, a lot of work, but it's really exciting to see students discover St. Olaf from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. The student body, the demographics of the student body have changed really significantly. So we have increased the number of students of color quite significantly from when I was here as a student. And we also have increased international student enrollment hugely since I was a student here. I think that we recognize the value of having a really diverse student body, and of course that there is obviously more work to do, but I'm really proud of the strides that we've been able to make as a community here at St. Olaf. The other change I would say is that there is just so much funded support for students here on campus to pursue all kinds of meaningful things, whether it is internship funding through the Piper Center, or the global semester, the study abroad program that I mentioned earlier that I was able to do as a student is now free for students because of a very generous gift from a donor. So I think it's really neat to also see the college reflect on how do we provide really meaningful, high impact learning experiences for students, and what can we do to really enhance their experience while they're here. So I feel like there's a lot of really, really positive momentum at St. Olaf, and it's a really neat community to be a part of in that regard.
It sounds like you're doing your job.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think so. But I feel, it's a really wonderful team of people, and there's really solid leadership at the college. So it's been great to be able to see a lot of really meaningful changes.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 85 is the College Board's new version of the Environmental Context Dashboard. Now, we shared back in June that the College Board was rolling out a revised version of the ECD in 90 days, and it is here. It is called Landscape, and the main website for Landscape is our recommended resource of the week. That website is cb.org/landscape. That's CB as in College Board.org/landscape. If you want to learn more about Landscape, just go to this website, check out the following tabs. Why Landscape? What is Landscape? About the data, resources, and then their FAQ, frequently asked questions. In 2018 and 19, 50 colleges participated in the pilot. This year, 100 to 150 colleges will participate in the pilot. Landscape helps admissions officers better understand the high schools and the neighborhoods that applicants come from. There will be a neighborhood score and there will be a high school score. The source of the data is similar to before, but the college data is not calling it a disadvantage score, but rather a neighborhood score out of 100 and a high school score out of 100. The higher the number, the greater the level of challenge of the neighborhood, and the higher the high school score, the greater the level of challenge of the high school. Some of the things that will factor into the score are things like free and reduced lunch data, average SAT scores sent from that high school to colleges over the last 3 years, and many, many, many other pieces of data. Most colleges welcome this data because school profiles is the main source that colleges rely on for this information. But so often they are so inconsistent, and sometimes school profiles are not submitted at all. The College Board will also provide ACT concordant tables, so ACT data can be used with landscape. The College Board has replaced the word disadvantage with the word challenge. So what type of student would thrive at St. Olaf? Like, how did you answer that question? I'm sure you get that a lot at fairs. Like, tell me the kind of student that will do well here versus the one that really won't maybe do so well here. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think this is a great place for self-motivated students who value relationship, who value building relationship with their professors, with staff members, with other students. It's a highly relational, collaborative place. So I think the students who do well here are the students who are used to finding balance in their lives, who recognize that academics are important, but that to be a full, balanced human being, it's also important to do the things you love to do outside of the classroom. So I think students who have been doing that already in high school tend to come and do very well here. It's not, I think, a great place for students who are, hyper competitive or incredibly individualistic. I think there's a very collectivistic kind of vibe on campus. And I think we all would say that we're here to support one another, in our journeys as both students and professionals. And there's something really powerful about that.
All right, Dave. So far I've asked you all softball questions. And for older people, I got a little Tim Russert in me.
Okay.
Used to be on Meet the Press.
Yeah.
So what could you be doing better if you were in charge and you had, the power to change a couple things and make them even better? What would you address?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question. I think, as I alluded to earlier, I think while we've made some really tremendous strides in terms of enrolling students of color from around the country, I think that we have more work to do. And I think we have more work to do in partnering with counselors and CBOs in a variety of different places. We already have really great relationships with a number of CBOs in Chicago, in California, in the Pacific Northwest. But I think really thinking about how we can broaden our recruitment efforts and make sure that this is a welcoming and inclusive place for everyone. I think that that's something that I think a lot about, and it's a really inherent part of our work. So that's something that's really important to me. And I also think the college is doing some deep self-reflection around how do we best support students once they're here on campus. And as I said, the college has invested a lot of resources in really enhancing the student experience. But how can we continue to go above and beyond and think about setting students up for success, not only in the classroom, but also in their lives as full people in this community? So those are some of the things I think about.
Have you noticed, Dave, that there's an increase in mental health challenges for students that they're bringing, whether it's social media or cell phones or pressure from parents because they're concerned, that their child might not have a job and they're coming in and they need to seek out more mental health resources? Because that seems like it's a national epidemic.
Yeah, I think it's something that's happening at all colleges and universities. And I would say at St. Olaf, I think that definitely is the case. And so I think, it's something to think collectively about, not only here at St. Olaf, but also I think in higher education in general, is how as students are facing all kinds of different pressures or engaging with people in different ways online or through social media, how do we really help students have a sense of balance and purpose and authenticity in both their day-to-day face-to-face interactions with people, but also, in their online world or different things like that. So I think thinking about supporting students with different mental health issues or anxiety or depression or different things like that is something that I think we as an institution think a lot about. Yeah, and it's such an important subject that I'm glad that I think that there is really healthy conversation around it.
Great. Well, it's time to wind down, Dave, but don't let any guest off without putting you on the hot seat.
Okay.
It's what we call our rapid round or our lightning round. We get to know you a little bit beyond Dave Wagner, admission director.
Okay.
And so I've got 5 rapid questions for you and see what you say. So the first is, if you had to select a career, knowing what you know now, and you couldn't pick college admissions, anything college admissions related, what would you do?
Oh, I mean, I think I would give being a famous actor another shot.
I thought you were going there.
I mean, I gave it a 9-month shot in my acting apprentice, but I would give the theater another try. Theater's super important to me, and I love it.
Michael Douglas, here we come.
There you go.
Second one, and I'm not going to let you use acting for this time for your answer, but what do you like to do to relax and have fun?
Oh, I'm a reader. So I love to go home and relax with a really, really great book. I'm also a traveler. So after I studied abroad, I learned that being immersed in different cultures and being out in the world is something that is hugely, hugely important to me. So I love to be out in the world, experiencing new places and new people. And that's something that's really important.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because my third question for you is, what's your favorite place in the world you've ever been?
Oh, I so struggle with this question because there are so many, many really great places. A place that's really, really special to me, and I think is just a fascinating, fascinating city, is Cairo. And I think Egypt and Egyptian culture is really, really fascinating. It was also kind of one of my first forays into being in another country and another culture. And so it was hugely formative in my life. And I was actually studying abroad on the global semester, and I was in Cairo, Egypt on September 11th.
Wow.
And that was a fascinating, challenging experience, but such a really amazing opportunity for deep reflection about our world and culture and people and some really complicated things. So it's a place that's special to me. Yeah.
Our listeners get a lot of good tips here on places to visit off that question.
Sure. Yeah.
And
people
so if that...
contact me for any travel tips.
Yes. Yeah. Especially after that trip you took when you were in St. Olaf. That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
As a student. That's incredible. And so this is probably going to be hard for you too, because you're a reader. Best couple books you've read?
Oh, this is almost impossible for me, but I can say the best book that I've read recently was The Overstory. And it's a fascinating book about trees and culture and climate change and our world and connectedness.
Wow.
And it had a big impact on me. And I couldn't put it down, frankly, but it felt big and it felt profound and it felt worth all the time I spent reading it. So if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that reminds me. I don't know if you've ever read the book Unequal Childhoods.
No.
Oh, that's one I go back and read it multiple times. It's fascinating.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's like it's like a sociologist. She was at Temple at the time. She's at Penn now, and she pretty much lived for a day or two with around 80 different kids in the 5th grade, and she studied them and went wherever they went, and she made sure it was some kids were underclass, some were working class, some were middle class, and some were upper class. And she's a sociologist. And so then she writes on the differences in child raising tactics from the underclass to working class to middle class to upper class. And then in the new edition, well, now it's not new, it's like 5 or 7 years old. She goes back and contacts these students 10 years later. So they were like 10 at the time and now they're 20.
Wow.
And it's just a super fascinating. I kind of am into the combination of sociology and education.
Yeah.
And so that's a book I'd recommend for you. I think based on what you've said today, I think you'd love that book. It's one of my favorites I've ever read.
Oh, nice. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I'll have to add that to my list and check it out.
And then my last question is your advice to parents or students, or let's do parents and students that are listening.
Sure. That's always a good question. I would say to both groups, I would say students, remember that you have so much power and control in this process. You determine where you visit, you determine what schools you're interested in, you determine what schools you ultimately decide to apply to. And yes, colleges and universities do make one big decision, your admissions decision, but you are making the vast, vast majority of decisions in this process. And I would really encourage you to remember, as you're making the decisions in this process, to remember who you are, ultimately what's really, really important to you, and to know that fit is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
St. Olaf is a Colleges That Change Lives school, which is this amazing group of nonprofit, or it's a nonprofit group of colleges. And the whole focus is really sort of on moving beyond rankings to really think intentionally about like, hey, what kind of experience am I going to have here? How will that shape me? What kind of opportunities will there be for me to take advantage of? And then how does that sort of launch me into whatever I might be doing after graduation? So I would say, remember, you have so much power. Be authentic to who you are and what's important to you. And remember, it's really all about finding a fit, and to be at a school where you feel comfortable, but also at a school that's going to challenge you and going to challenge you in meaningful ways to be your best self, both as a student and a person.
Love it. And what about parents?
Parents, I would say this is a really fun process. I am not a parent, but I can imagine what a really wonderful thing it must be to watch your young person emerge into the world as an adult and start thinking about what the next steps in their future might be. I think it's really, really important that this is a student-driven process. So parents, I think the more you can do to offer yourself as a sounding board, as a support for your student in this process, the better.
Dave, this has been absolutely fantastic. I really, really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for all the information you shared, both about the Common App as well as St. Olaf. And thanks for giving me such a good time on my visit there. And say hi to the rest of your staff for me as well.
Well, I will do that. And thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And for my first podcast experience, I think this is amazing. I want to do this all the time.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm kind of in a little bit of a podcast community of some others that do college admissions podcasts. So maybe I can, recommend you get on there. It's also a good way to get the word out, about your school from the convenience of your home and the shorts, pajamas, or whatever you are, in a real chill way. Don't have to put on the suit there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So thank you so much. This has been a really, really fun conversation. And I'm so appreciative that you were able to come up and visit. And I'll look forward to hopefully seeing you at some point in the near future.
Yeah, and you'll be seeing some of my applications as well. Most
Great.
Definitely. Now, before we close out, if you could just give the St. Olaf website and if there's any social media at all that you'd recommend, the people that connect into if they want to follow you.
Yeah, you can find all the information you would want to find at stolaf.edu. And then we do have really active Instagram and Facebook that you can follow us on and get a ton of great information.
And why don't you just spell that for someone who may not know how we're spelling St. Olaf here?
This is true. I forget that it's kind of a funny Norwegian name.
Yeah, it is.
stolaf.edu, and that's where you would find all of the information.
Great. Thanks again, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
Next week in the news, study finds that more AP classes may not be better. And we'll be in chapter 86 of 171 answers. And we're talking about when to start the college admissions process. And next week's question asks if an AP score of 3 should be submitted to a highly selective school or not. And Mark kicks off his interview with Miss Tara Kalanissen. She's the admissions officer at Smith College. And she's talking about what you need to know about college fairs, information sessions, and college admission interviews. Part 1.
All right, Anika. No college profile for the day. We'll give it a break. But we'll start back up next week with Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. Any plans for the week?
Work.
Can you sound happier?
Work.
See, I love my job. I got work, but work is fun for me.
That's all right. I just need a little vacay, that's all.
I know, it's all good. I told you can use that timeshare when you need to go to Virginia. You need to take me up on that offer.
It's on the list. It's on the to-do list. I'm on it.
Awesome. Well, listen, we'll see you again on the weekend.
All right.
Enjoy your week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo, and marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.